In 1982, a con artist sold a fake rare coin collection to Robert Cialdini. What makes that worth your attention isn't the fraud, it's who Cialdini is. He's the author of Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, the defining text on why people comply, why people say yes, why people get manipulated. He had spent years cataloging exactly how it worked, and none of that knowledge protected him. I want you to sit with that for a second. Not because it's ironic, because it's instructive. Let's start with what dark psychology actually is. Not the TikTok version, not a list of tricks. The actual behavioral mechanism. Dark psychology, at its core, is the deliberate exploitation of the psychological processes that make us human. The need to belong, the drive toward consistency, the way our brains take shortcuts when processing information, the way we trust people who reflect our own beliefs back at us. And here's the thing about those processes. They don't have an off switch. They're not features you can disable because you've read about them. Knowing that your brain defaults to confirmation bias doesn't stop your brain from defaulting to confirmation bias. It means you're aware of it happening in hindsight. So why does the immunity belief make you more vulnerable, not less? Because of how dark psychology is actually practiced. Here's the first thing you need to understand about the people who use dark psychology deliberately. They don't target your ignorance. They target your certainty, your self-image, your conviction that you would see this coming. That conviction is not neutral. It's operational. It creates blind spots with specific, predictable shapes. And a skilled practitioner doesn't need to know you personally to know where those shapes are. Read through these slowly and notice something. You see a persuasive argument and think, I can evaluate this objectively. You're told something that confirms what you already believe and think. This must be true. It fits. You're told something that challenges what you believe and think. This seems suspect. You just watched confirmation bias operate in real time, not because you're unintelligent, because you're human. Confirmation bias is not a flaw. It's an efficiency mechanism. Your brain cannot evaluate every piece of incoming information from scratch. It uses what it already knows as a filter. Dark psychology doesn't fight that filter. It feeds it. A skilled manipulator studies what you already believe to be true, and then delivers their agenda packaged inside those beliefs. They're not trying to change your mind. They're trying to appear to confirm it. The compliance comes later. Once you've accepted them as someone who understands the world the way you do, the decisions they steer you toward feel like your own conclusions. And this is where the immunity belief becomes a liability. If you are convinced you would recognize manipulation, what do you do when someone appears to validate your worldview? You're less skeptical, not more. The alarm you thought was protecting you was muted by your own confidence. I want you to sit with that for a second. The people inside NXIVM who stayed the longest, who recruited others, who defended the organization publicly, many of them believed, specifically, that they were the kind of people who would know if something was wrong. That self-image wasn't incidental to their recruitment. It was central to it. Because the question isn't whether you're smart enough to see manipulation. The question is whether you can see it when what's being targeted isn't your decision-making. It's your identity. This is the mechanism that separates dark psychology from basic persuasion. Basic persuasion tries to change what you think. Dark psychology targets who you are. Here's how that works. When someone attacks your decision, tells you that you're making a mistake, you can evaluate that on its merits. You can push back. You have cognitive access to the disagreement. When someone targets your identity, positions you as a specific kind of person, someone intelligent, chosen, perceptive, rare, and then ties continued belonging to behaving consistently with that identity, you're not being persuaded anymore. You're being managed. The psychological principle at work is what Cialdini called commitment and consistency. Once we've committed to an identity, publicly or privately, we behave in ways that are consistent with it. We don't even experience this as pressure. It feels like integrity. Dark psychology exploits that entirely. The manipulation isn't the ask. The manipulation is the identity that was carefully constructed around you before the ask was ever made. And here's what that feels like from the inside. Like you. If this is the kind of analysis you want more of, the behavioral architecture underneath what looks like ordinary human behavior, subscribe. I'll be here. Let's talk about the third mechanism, because even if you understand confirmation bias, even if you know how identity targeting works, there's a process that makes both of those irrelevant in the moment it matters most. Emotional flooding. When we experience strong emotion, fear, love, shame, euphoria, grief, prefrontal cortex function reduces. This is not a metaphor. This is neurological. The part of your brain responsible for rational evaluation, long-term consequence assessment, and critical thinking is physiologically compromised by acute emotional states. Dark psychology doesn't create that state accidentally. It engineers it. The escalating intensity of a new relationship, the manufactured crisis that requires an immediate decision, the moment of profound intimacy just before a significant ask, the public shame event that produces the terror of being nothing. These are not emotional coincidences. They are delivery mechanisms. The emotional state is the method of entry. And here's the thing about emotional flooding. It doesn't feel like compromise. It feels like clarity, like the moment you finally understand what's important, like the truth cutting through the noise. That feeling, sudden clarity, knowing what matters, in the context of high emotional arousal, that is one of the most reliable indicators that your rational faculties are not fully online, which is exactly when the significant ask arrives. I want you to notice something. Every single mechanism I've described, confirmation bias, exploitation, identity targeting, emotional flooding, has a common architecture. They all operate below the level at which you've been told to watch for manipulation. You've been told to watch for lies, for red flags, for behavior that seems obviously wrong. But dark psychology doesn't operate at that level. That's the point. So what does protect you? Not knowledge, not intelligence, not the belief that you'd see it coming. The research on this is consistent. The single most effective protective factor against dark psychology is not individual, it's relational. It's access to someone outside the system, someone who loves you, who is not afraid to tell you what they see, who has no investment in the story you've been given. One honest conversation, that's it. And here's the thing, dark psychology knows this. That's why isolation is always the first structural move, not physical isolation necessarily. Social isolation, information isolation, the careful management of who you talk to and what they know. Critical thinking is specifically targeted. Thought stopping exists because of critical thinking. Loaded language exists because of critical thinking. Social isolation exists because the practitioner of dark psychology knows that one person outside the system, one person who saw you before any of this started, is the single greatest threat to everything they've built. They're not afraid of your doubt. They planned for it. What they cannot plan for is someone who knew you first. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Not about dark psychology, about yourself. Who in your life could tell you right now if something was wrong? Not with your choices, with you. Is that person close enough to see it? Are they allowed to say it? That's not a therapeutic question. That's a structural one. And the answer tells you more about your actual vulnerability to dark psychology than anything you've ever read about it. Subscribe if you want to stay in it.